SpongeBob is suspiciously rich. For a guy with a stingy boss and not super rich parents, he seems to have a ton of cash to throw around. And that's because the money he makes doesn't exactly come from a legal operation. He stumbled onto this by accident, and now he's using it to fuel his addiction. But that's not the only crime he's committed to gain something. So join me as we dive into the SpongeBob Rich Theory. SpongeBob is a cashier at the Krusty Krab, but despite being a minimum wage worker, he might be one of the richest people in Bikini Bottom. Like, take a look at the episode All That Glitters. After a spatula breaks, the doctor advises him to get a new one. And that's exactly what he does when he sees a shiny new spatula on display at the store. But when he's taking out the money to buy it, he doesn't pull out a few $100s, he pulls out stacks of cash. He even refers to it as pocket change. But that's not the only time we've seen him with a lot of money. In the episode Hello Bikini Bottom, he literally gave Mr. Krabs enough money to buy back the Krusty Krab. At the start of the episode, Mr. Krabs sold the Krusty Krab to fund SpongeBob and Squidward's tours. And considering all that they did in the episode, it definitely sold for a pretty penny. But then, at the end of the episode, Mr. Krabs lost all his money and couldn't buy the restaurant back. This is when SpongeBob showed up and gave him all the money he needed, saying it's from Gary's college fund. We even saw the pawn shop owner counting the stacks of cash that SpongeBob basically gave to Mr. Krabs for free. And when you think about it, SpongeBob weirdly does have a lot of cash on hand. In the episode New Digs, he pays Mr. Krabs rent in cash for living in the Krusty Krab. Considering Mr. Krabs barely pays him, it's surprising that he even has that much to give to him in the first place. But by far, the weirdest situation comes in the season 3 episode Chocolate with Nuts. After looking through Squidward's mail, SpongeBob wants to be an entrepreneur to become rich. And to do that, he and Patrick decide to go door to door to sell chocolate bars. But the first weird thing comes up when they actually buy the chocolate. How did they buy so much considering they're trying to get rich? Well, they clearly invested in their business. That's a normal thing to do. What isn't normal, however, is them buying these candy bar bags. Basically, a salesman keeps scamming them into buying his bags and they keep buying them. But after putting a ton of money into the chocolate, how do they have more for these bags? It's not like they bought one or two, they bought a ton of them. So many in fact that the same guy scams them again into buying 20 candy bar bag carrying bags. During the whole episode, they're trying to get rich. And with both of them making very little money, how did they buy these bags before selling even a single candy bar? They should collectively have very little money considering Patrick doesn't have a job. Pretty much all the money is coming from SpongeBob. And this makes you wonder, how much money does SpongeBob really even make? Because we know that Mr. Krabs is a cheap boss, but for SpongeBob to buy all this stuff, he'd have to make a decent amount of money at least. So how much money does Mr. Krabs really pay him? Well, there's a ton of different answers all throughout the show, so to get the most accurate answer, let's do a rapid fire round of all the times we've heard what SpongeBob makes. In the episode Big Pink Loser, SpongeBob reveals that when he first started working at the Krusty Krab, Mr. Krabs took $100 an hour from him. In other words, he made negative $100 an hour. But then in the episode One Course Meal, Mr. Krabs paid him in a fake currency he called Wacky Bucks. In other words, he made nothing. The first real income we actually learn about came in the episode SpongeBob You're Fired, where Mr. Krabs fired him to save 5 cents. His salary was the 5 cents. But then in the episode Squid on Strike, SpongeBob outright refused to take Mr. Krabs' money because he loves grilling. So far, we know that SpongeBob might be making a whole 5 cents. But don't worry, that number actually gets raised quite a bit, to $5. In the episode Money Talks, SpongeBob reveals that Mr. Krabs was $5 short on payday, so he gave him his soul. But that's probably not the most we've seen for him. In the season 4 episode Skill Crane, SpongeBob actually gets paid something. Now, we don't get to see how much it was, but considering Squidward also got paid, and his entire paycheck, which was in quarters, fit into this small bag, SpongeBob probably didn't get very much. With all these, one thing becomes pretty clear. SpongeBob doesn't exactly get paid a lot. I mean, considering the highest number we have for him is $5, that's really concerning. So, if SpongeBob gets paid nothing, how does he have all this money? It's obvious that whatever Mr. Krabs pays him, it's not nearly enough to survive. But despite that, not only does SpongeBob have a house and a pet, but he also has tons of cash to throw on stupid things. Well, the answer is pretty simple, right? His parents. They're clearly wealthy and they give him money whenever he needs it. That's why he has so much money. His parents basically fund his life and let him do whatever he wants. Well, that would be true if his parents were as rich as people thought they were. Now, I could make a whole separate video about SpongeBob's parents and how rich they really are, but to make things simple, SpongeBob's parents do have a lot of money. They're just not crazy rich. Like, they'll buy new cars and have nice jewelry, but when it comes to the really expensive stuff like a house, theirs is mediocre at best. They'll go above and beyond for SpongeBob and themselves, but nothing really points towards them being mega rich. At least not rich enough to hand SpongeBob thousands upon thousands of dollars. They might spot him a few hundred here or there, but they aren't rich enough to fund his life. In fact, in the episode Blackjack, we learn that Mrs. SquarePants doesn't even work. It's just SpongeBob's dad who has a job who gets them all this money. So while from the outside they seem rich, there's nothing that really points towards their supposed wealth. And to add on to that, in the season 13 episode Ma and Pa's Big Hurrah, they move to a retirement home suggesting they don't bring in any new money. So clearly, while his parents have a lot of money, they just don't have as much as SpongeBob does. But as it turns out, SpongeBob may not have as much money as we previously thought. Because while on the surface he seems to spend a lot, behind the scenes, he's secretly broke. Like, take a look at episodes like Life of Crime or Doing Time. Both show SpongeBob having literally $0 in his bank account. That doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, in the same season, he literally had enough to buy all these chocolates and a ton of bags. How can he be so rich one day and then so broke the next that he can't even afford a balloon? That just doesn't make sense. So what's going on? How can he be outspending so much if he actually has nothing? Well, there's a secret SpongeBob's been hiding from everyone else that explains exactly what's going on. His addiction. So what about the times when SpongeBob got crazy rich? There's a few episodes in the show where SpongeBob randomly got a lot of money and became insanely wealthy. Couldn't that be his ticket to the money we see him with today? Well, as it turns out, no. Because weirdly, by the end of every single one of those episodes, the same thing happens. He ends up losing all of his money. Like in the episode Patty Hype, SpongeBob decides he's gonna sell all these colored patties on his own. And while at first people make fun of him, soon the idea blows up and SpongeBob has so many customers that the line stretches all the way to the Krusty Krab. By this point, SpongeBob has become seriously rich. He has more money than he knows what to do with. But this is where he would reveal the first part of his addiction. After getting mentioned on the news, SpongeBob told them that their business was really successful and they had a lot of money. But instead of having any plans on what to do with all this money, SpongeBob mentioned that he tried his best to use it. And by that, he meant he tried to burn it, bury it, and in the end, he was forced to give it away just to get rid of it. Why would he want to get rid of all his money so bad? Sure, he had a ton, but who doesn't like having more money? It doesn't make sense for him to want to get rid of it so bad. Well, to understand why he did this, we have to go back to the episode Chocolate with Nuts. After selling all their chocolate to the guy who kept following them, they ended up having a lot of money and completing their dream of being rich. But instead of doing all the things they saw in the magazines, they end up spending all their money in one place, to take Mary and her mother on a date. And this wasn't something the both of them thought of. This was SpongeBob's plan. He wanted to spend all his money in one go. Even when Patrick asks if they're living the dream yet, SpongeBob said they can't until they spend all their money. And this reveals the secret of SpongeBob's addiction. He can't stop himself from spending money. Whether it be literally throwing money into a fire or spending it on a date, SpongeBob has to get rid of all his money. And this isn't something he does over a period of time. Literally after getting the money from the chocolate guy, he immediately knew what he was going to do with it and spent it all on a fancy restaurant. He doesn't care where the money goes, he only cares about spending it and getting rid of it. Now, this addiction seems pretty bad. I mean, because of it, SpongeBob literally can't save or hold any money. But we haven't seen the worst of it yet. That would come in the episode Porous Pockets. After finding a pearl inside an oyster, SpongeBob ends up selling it and becoming a gazillionaire. At first, he takes things slow, buying a few things at the mall, but after a while, the money really starts to get to his head. He literally gives hundreds of dollars just for ice cream. And when people see how much money he has, they just start following him because he keeps tossing money. With so many people just pretending to be his friend, SpongeBob lets the money get to his head and just starts throwing it around left and right. He basically just gave the money to whoever wanted some. All he cared about was looking and being rich. At the end of the episode, he runs out of it and pretty much gets back to where he started. This was enough money to last him multiple lifetimes, but still, he spent it all in a matter of weeks. And this exposes the worst of SpongeBob's little spending problem. Whenever he has a little bit of money, he has to spend it. He doesn't care about items or material things, he just gets a high from getting rid of it. Whether that be giving it to people or buying stuff for himself, SpongeBob has no control. But he doesn't just do this when he becomes insanely rich, he also does this in his day-to-day life. And we already saw a bit of that when he was buying an expensive spatula or giving rent to crabs. But that wasn't all of it. Like in the episode Idiot Box, he buys an entire huge TV just to play with the box. He keeps making these impulsive decisions and it's costing him. Despite constantly having a ton of money, he keeps spending it on stupid things and running out. That's why sometimes his bank account has no money. It's because he spent it all on his addiction. He doesn't think what he's doing is wrong because for him, it's completely normal. He has to get rid of all the money, no matter what. And we see the worst of this in his day-to-day life in the episode Drive Happy. At the start, SpongeBob was at a dealership randomly looking at cars. But when the salesman showed up, SpongeBob mentioned that he was just looking because he doesn't have a driver's license. But when the salesman put just a little bit of pressure, SpongeBob immediately just bought the boat. His only concern here was that he didn't have a license. He didn't even care about the money. And as the episode was going on, SpongeBob just kept continuing to spend. Whether it be giving a stack of quarters to Patrick or repairing his car, he just keeps spending even after buying the boat. And that's why he's more than happy to pay the price for the expensive spatula or give money to Mr. Krabs. He's just happy to get rid of it, so he doesn't mind. But how does SpongeBob afford all this? Like I said earlier, SpongeBob has a lot of money, but we don't know where it comes from. In the episode where he got rich, it makes sense because he was rich. But how does he spend like this in his day-to-day life? He obviously doesn't keep the money from when he gets rich, nor do his parents have enough to give him that much. Even Mr. Krabs doesn't pay him nearly close to how much he spends. So then, how does he do it? How does he have all this money to afford his addiction? Well, when times get desperate for SpongeBob, he turns to a different method to earn the money he needs. And let's just say, what he does isn't exactly legal. So, I already know what you're thinking. SpongeBob committing crimes? That's impossible. And you're right. Even if SpongeBob's life was on the line, he probably wouldn't do the wrong thing to save himself. And that's what I also thought for a while, until I saw the season 2 episode Hall Monitor. In the episode, Mrs. Puff lets SpongeBob have the Hall Monitor uniform after he spent the entire day giving his speech. But instead of just taking the uniform home and returning it the next day, he took his role really seriously and went around town trying to keep everyone in check. Obviously, that didn't work out too well, and by the end, everyone was scared because they thought a maniac was on the loose. Despite trying to do the right thing, SpongeBob ended up making the wrong decisions and making things worse. But this wasn't the first time something like this happened. In the episode Midlife Crustacean, SpongeBob and Patrick break into Mr. Krabs' mother's house. They did this because Mr. Krabs was sick of them being losers and they wanted to show him how cool they really are. As if this already wasn't bad enough, SpongeBob also mentioned how they break into her house all the time. Once again, he committed a crime while trying to be a good person, but this wouldn't be the only house he's broken into to get what he wanted. In the episode Squid's Visit, he broke into Squidward's house to steal his vacuum. His reason this time was because he wanted Squidward to come to his house and he kept saying no. Considering he did this when Squidward was at home and he never heard him, SpongeBob has to be seriously good at breaking in and sneaking around. But apart from that, he also stole, something he's suspiciously good at. And we see that a bit better in the episode Barnacle Face. After Pearl's face was covered with barnacles, SpongeBob was told to help her. They spent the entire episode trying to figure out different solutions, but nothing really worked. With the school dance being that night, SpongeBob decided to take Mr. Krabs' diamonds and stick them to Pearl's face. Considering SpongeBob knows exactly the type of person Mr. Krabs is, he should have known that he would never give his jewels to anyone, even Pearl. And that becomes really obvious at the end of the episode when Mr. Krabs saw his jewels were missing and thought he'd been robbed. Again, while trying to help someone, he took something that wasn't his without asking. And a much severe case of this would come in the episode Krusty Catering. After Mr. Krabs asked SpongeBob to fancy up the Krabby Patties, SpongeBob took jewels from the rich woman's house they were catering in and put them in the patties. Considering it took Mr. Krabs the entire episode to find the room where SpongeBob got the jewels from, he seems to know his way around the mansion. In fact, the funniest part of the episode was when Mr. Krabs was telling SpongeBob about how stealing is wrong. This is the same guy that dug up a grave for money, by the way. It shows that while SpongeBob isn't a criminal at heart, he often does bad things when trying to help other people. And it's usually because he doesn't know where to draw the line between what is and isn't allowed. But so far, none of this points towards any real money. Sure, SpongeBob's stolen a thing or two here, but he doesn't keep any of it. So then, how does SpongeBob have all this money to fund his addiction? Well, there's just one crime that SpongeBob's committed that we haven't looked at yet. In the episode Safe Deposit Krabs, Mr. Krabs is trapped inside a bank vault, and after SpongeBob realizes that he's stuck, he starts to panic because he's probably gonna run out of oxygen very soon. But instead of calling the cops or doing literally anything else, his first plan is to break into the bank. Once again, he's breaking a law while trying to help someone, but this time, things are a little bit different. Because instead of being a headless chicken like always and doing stupid stuff, SpongeBob has a plan for once. His idea is to climb to the top of the bank and then get into the vents to get inside. For someone doing something so serious for the first time, this is a pretty good plan considering he thought of it on the spot. Or maybe he didn't, because this isn't a plan someone like SpongeBob just makes in a high pressure situation on the spot. This is something SpongeBob's been thinking about for a while. And breaking into a bank is not the only thing SpongeBob's had on his mind. In the episode Life of Crime, he says something really weird that helps us understand his actions a bit better. After Patrick asks SpongeBob to borrow some money, SpongeBob says this:
"It's okay, Patrick. There's lots of money in the First National Bank of SpongeBob."
Ignoring the fact that he said that he had a lot of money, the way he describes his bank is a lot more telling. The First National Bank of SpongeBob. Not really the way I would talk about my bank account. But when you think about it, what does the First National Bank of SpongeBob even mean? Does he own a bank or something? And why is it the First National? Is he making a second one all over the country? Whatever he's saying doesn't really make sense, until you realize that all of this actually has a hidden meaning. If you've watched the show growing up, you'll probably know that there's a bank in Bikini Bottom called the First Nautical Bank. And immediately, it becomes clear that SpongeBob didn't come up with this name. He took it from an already existing bank. But the way he puts his name at the end saying "of SpongeBob" really sounds like he's saying it's his. He's basically personalized an entire bank for himself. The way he's talking about it sounds like he's imagining the whole bank belongs to him. Why would SpongeBob do that? Well, as it turns out, this was the exact bank he tried to rob in the episode Doing Time. In the episode, SpongeBob got Mrs. Puff put in jail and decided that the best way to get her out was by getting into prison. And so to do that, he decided that he was going to rob a bank. Now, their attempt here was honestly quite pathetic, but you have to remember, he wasn't actually trying to steal the money, he was trying to get arrested. And we know that because SpongeBob is really stealthy. He was able to sneak around and steal all sorts of stuff. Here, he was purposely playing dumb just so he could get caught. And so while playing dumb, he wasn't considered a threat by the bank and they just tossed him out. But this wasn't his real attempt at robbing a bank. This was just an act at getting arrested. The real deal came in the episode Missing Identity. After a customer pointed out that his name card was missing, SpongeBob started to panic. He immediately started imagining all the consequences of losing his card. And while doing so, he imagined someone stealing his identity and pretending to be him. But that wasn't all the person was doing. While pretending to be SpongeBob, he also imagined them robbing a bank. That's a very specific crime. And it's not just any bank, it's the First Nautical Bank. The same one SpongeBob talked about in a personalized tone. But then things get stranger as while he's imagining that, SpongeBob keeps screaming "I'm innocent" over and over again. On the surface, it seems like SpongeBob is worried that he's going to be framed for robbing the bank. But this is not what someone looks like when they think they're being framed. Usually, they're scared or they start panicking. But the first thing SpongeBob does when he thinks about this is he immediately starts defending himself, almost as if he's guilty. And that starts to make a lot more sense when you combine everything we've looked at so far. SpongeBob is really stealthy, he's tried to break into a bank, he's imagined himself robbing one, and he's even broken into other people's homes. The way he screams doesn't feel like he's worried about being framed, it sounds more like he's worried about getting caught. And as if that wasn't enough, SpongeBob still has a suspicious amount of cash we don't really know the origins of. When you connect all these puzzle pieces, everything becomes pretty clear. SpongeBob robbed a bank. And it wasn't some daylight robbery, it was a stealth mission. But there's just one thing that doesn't make sense. While we know SpongeBob has an addiction and can't control his money spending, why would he go on to rob a bank? At heart, he's a good person. He never really does anything bad. Unless he's trying to help someone. And that's actually his weakness. Because someone would take advantage of him, not only using his kindness, but also his stealth. And we see the perfect example of that in the episode The Getaway. After Mrs. Puff crashes out and tries to get a new teacher for SpongeBob, this prisoner breaks out of prison and gets into SpongeBob's boat, pretending to be his new teacher. This prisoner, Sticky Fins, realizes that SpongeBob thinks he's his teacher and immediately takes advantage of the situation. Because SpongeBob is listening to him as if he were his driving instructor, Sticky Fins has SpongeBob drive him to the jewelry store. There, he has SpongeBob distract the owner and steal all the jewels while he's not paying attention. And thinking this is just part of his driving lesson, SpongeBob does as he's told. He willingly helps a criminal commit a crime, thinking he's doing the right thing. Even when he robs an electronics store, SpongeBob doesn't bat an eye. He thinks that this is just normal teacher behavior. So if SpongeBob can help someone rob a jewelry store without realizing what he's doing is wrong, what's really stopping him from helping someone rob a bank? As long as he thinks he's doing the right thing, he'll willingly do anything, even commit a crime. That's why he imagined himself robbing a bank. That was him feeling guilty for what he did. The bank he robbed was probably the first nautical bank considering the way he personalized it in his mind. And just like with the jewels, this heist was probably pulled at night. But if SpongeBob did all this, why would he get to keep the money? After all, these criminals are manipulating him to help them commit crimes. Why would they pay him after? That just doesn't make sense. Well, to understand that, we have to look at the end of The Getaway. After Sticky Fins and SpongeBob have been driving for a long time, the cops eventually catch up to them. And it's at this point SpongeBob turns things up a notch. He starts driving like a literal maniac. Even a tough criminal like Sticky Fins wants to go back to jail after sitting in a boat with SpongeBob for like 10 minutes. Basically, SpongeBob is really annoying and impossible to contain. So while he may be easy to manipulate, SpongeBob is a huge liability to these criminals to the point where they leave the second he becomes too dangerous. And they're not exactly trying to get all their loot, they're just trying to make it out alive and escape SpongeBob's insanity. So thanks to his craziness, the criminals leave him alone with the money and he's just able to keep it. And with the money, he can do whatever he wants, which in his case is just getting rid of it as soon as possible. All in all, SpongeBob's addiction has taken him to weird places. Because of it, he started accidentally helping criminals who leave their money because they're afraid for their lives. With that money, SpongeBob can go around spending it however he needs, not only being able to afford life, but also being able to spend as much as he wanted. And that's how we got this diamond. Wait, a diamond? Going back to the episode All That Glitters, SpongeBob shows this diamond when he's trying to buy the spatula. It's hidden inside Gary's shell, and SpongeBob used it to buy the spatula. But why would SpongeBob even have this diamond in the first place? He has a spending problem. Whenever he sees money, he has to get rid of it. Why would SpongeBob bother buying a diamond? Well, as it turns out, he didn't buy this diamond, because this isn't something you can just buy. Throughout the show, we've seen a lot of diamonds and gems in all forms of shapes and sizes, but none like this. Even the diamonds Patrick has come across, despite some of them being bigger, look nothing like this one. And that's because this isn't a diamond SpongeBob could just buy. In fact, this is the only diamond of its kind. There's not a single diamond in the entire ocean like this. Except just one. There is just one diamond in the entire ocean that looks exactly like this one. And in the season 7 episode The Great Patty Caper, we get to see it. After stopping the train because he lost the key to the secret formula, SpongeBob has the suspects come out and be interrogated by the police. And after the cops look at the baby, they find something interesting: a diamond. This diamond is nearly identical to the one SpongeBob hid in Gary's shell. It's the same size, it has similar cuts, and overall, it looks basically the same. But this diamond isn't any ordinary diamond. Listen closely to what the cop calls it.
You uncovered Neptune's Jewel of the Sea.
This is Neptune's diamond, King Neptune's Jewel of the Sea. Out of all the diamonds in all of Bikini Bottom, only King Neptune has one that looks nearly identical to this one. And if SpongeBob was brave enough to consider the bank as his own, what could he have done to get this diamond?